She teaches English to sophomores and seniors. She relishes every minute she gets to re-experience Holden Caulfield, Blanche Dubois, and Nick Carraway. She's new to the storytelling scene, but hopes to tell more stories this year and beyond. Please welcome Sarah Bunger.
I just finished my 19th year of teaching high school English. Thank you for being also a part. And this means two things. The first is I love books and reading. And the second is it's really difficult for me to separate the book that changed my life from the book that changed my life because of students' reaction to it. I cannot extricate myself from those experiences. Which brings me to Of Mice and Men. Is this a great book? No. It's a little heavy-handed for my taste. But it changed my life because this high school kid named Doug Meeker taught me this book. About 13 years ago, I was teaching an American Lit class of 12 students, 11 of whom were boys, 6 of whom had the same probation officer. It was a terrible class, and they were terrible students. But they loved Of Mice and Men. They just got the story of these two best friends and the inherent loneliness of the world. I remember we had like a 20-minute conversation one day about Lenny and his dream of all the multicolored rabbits. And they kept asking me, what does it mean? Why does he want it? And I bounced it back to them to think about. And they came up with this horrible idea that they were genetically mutant rabbits made by a mad scientist, which is when I realized small group work had gone awry. And I needed to intervene. And so I say something like, hey guys, remember when we talked about the American dream? Remember that we said that we think anything is possible if we work hard? Well, for Lenny, who thinks pretty concretely, maybe his American dream is to have as much of the thing that brings him comfort, like the rabbit's fur, as he could imagine. It's not about the rabbits, guys. It's about knowing that you deserve the thing that brings you comfort, even if you don't know how to say that yet. And Doug Meeker totally gets what I'm saying. And he loved this book, and he loved those two best friends, and he hated Curly, and he felt bad for old Candy's dog. And he understood how terrible and tragic and unfair it was that George had to shoot Lenny. I hope I didn't give anything away. And he was also the only kid who didn't complain about how the book ended in the middle of a conversation. He understood what Steinbeck was trying to do. Side note, he always called it And Mice of Men rather than Of Mice and Men. And every time he did that, I had this image of like a person being reduced to something lesser, right? Like somehow the humanness is lost. Like you put a mouse in a maze to watch it struggle. And I overthink things, and I know that. Anyway, Doug joined the Marines a little while after he got his GED, and he went off to defend our collective notion of the American dream. And I didn't see him again for about 3 years. And then he came back to visit me. He had been deployed to Iraq and almost immediately sent to Fallujah. Do you guys remember Fallujah? Okay. Doug, I notice, is injured. He's got his arm in a sling underneath his coat. And I say, how are you? How's your sister? What's been going on with you? And he says he's home for a bit. He got hurt. He gestures to his arm. And I say, how'd that happen? And he tells me the story of his injury. He said he and his squad were doing house checks. This was the time of the house raids. They were checking for insurgents. They did it all the time, he said. They did it in the bright daylight. And this last time he went in, he was with about 8 guys. Some of them he knew. Some of them were his really good friends, best friends. And he goes upstairs to secure it, and lots of the others stay downstairs, when all of a sudden there's an explosion, and the top floor gives way and crashes down to the bottom floor. and it's all just rubble. And Doug is on top of the rubble. He's on top of them. And he tells me that there's only one other guy that he knows that made it out. All the others, he says. And then he trails off, doesn't finish the sentence. And then he tells me that when his arm is healed, he's gonna go back. Because he doesn't know where else to go. Because that's where everybody else is. And I don't even remember how we ended that conversation. I think a bell rang, honestly. And I leaned in and I gave him a hug, careful about this arm. And I'm about 5 steps away when he says, "Hey, do you still teach that book, And Mice of Men?" And my head immediately goes to that image of a person that's not a person anymore and is in a maze and struggling. But I smile too because it's Doug, and he always said it like that. And because this kid just told me this terrible story, but asked me about a book I taught him 3 years ago. And then I think about how lonely he is without his best friends. And then I think about how terrible and tragic and unfair all of this is for him. And then I get it. But all I can say is, yeah, every junior reads it. And he takes his hand, I swear to God, takes his hand and he holds it to his chest like this. And he says, "That was my favorite book. Don't ever stop teaching it, okay?" Thank you.